Hey, welcome in, everybody. We are on the AL.com recruiting show, week 4 here. I'm Ben Thomas from AL.com, high school sports reporter. As you might notice, my normal co-host, Simone Eli, is not with us today. She is on vacation. We'll be back next week. But in her place, we have Randy Kennedy, contributor to AL.com. He does our Southern 120 recruiting rankings, helps on the A list, and also hosts a sports talk show, Mobile-based, on Sports Talk 99.5. So Randy and I are going to talk about recruiting in the state today. Randy, how you doing?
Doing great. It's big shoes to fill, but I'm looking forward to it.
I think you can do it. Randy, I always like to talk about if we have a commitment in the state, we always like to kind of start off with that first. We had one this week, actually over the weekend, Khalib Johnson from a dual threat quarterback from Clay Chalkville. Khalib commits to, as you can see his stats there. He commits to Louisville, which he called his dream school. He committed to them over South Florida, Kansas, Virginia Tech, but he goes to Louisville instead. What do you think about his game, Randy? What have you seen about Khalib Johnson?
Well, one thing, it could be his dream school because Lamar Jackson. Now everybody wants to be the next Lamar Jackson in college or the pros. Khalib Johnson has a lot of those same skills. But then you see a lot when you watch his highlights and watch his play. In some ways, he reminds me of Trent Battle last year at Daphne, a guy with a lot of athletic ability. But when you watch him scramble, he's often scrambling to pass as opposed to scrambling to run. I think that's going to take him a long way. And you see that more and more from quarterbacks who have that athletic ability, but say, look, I'm going to use that athletic ability to get yards on the ground, but also just to free myself up to make the passing game more effective. He has shown that during his career so far at Clay Chalkville. I think it's a really good pickup for Louisville.
Yeah, he is considered a dual threat guy, Randy, but he's really more of a pass first guy, as you can see from his highlights that Patrick is playing there. He's got good height, good weight, above average arm, probably a good deep ball, and like you said, Randy, he can pick up yardage with the run, but he's not Nick Marshall. He's kind of a battering ram there as you see him work there in the field.
Well, and as I said, a lot of these guys want to use their running ability, but also just their nimbleness in the pocket to step away from a rusher, to be able to buy time to throw the ball down the field. And that's how guys see that they're getting to the NFL and getting to major college. And so Khalib Johnson certainly fits that mold. I think he's got a chance to maybe emerge as the best quarterback in the state this year.
That's interesting. That's high praise there. Patrick, if you can throw up our list of quarterbacks. We talked a couple of weeks ago, Randy, about the top quarterbacks in the state. Thank you. So now we have 3 committed. And, of course, other guys will develop over the season. We'll see some other guys come into that fray. Tanner Bailey we had on a couple of weeks ago, the Gordo quarterback, now committed to Oregon. I'm actually going to see him over the weekend. He pitches for Gordo, and they'll come down and play Mobile Christian. As we talked about, Caleb committed to Louisville and Zach Pyron committed to Baylor. Randy, these other guys on the list, what stands out? Anybody particularly stand out on this list to you?
Where Connor Harrell at Thompson has been a guy who's been super productive in his 1 year as a starter, got hurt last year, really didn't get a chance to see much in the state championship game, but I think he's a Power 5 guy for sure, going to commit somewhere, play somewhere, SEC level, or at least somewhere in Power 5 football. Zach Pyron is a guy who is maybe a little more of a traditional 6'3", stand in the pocket, throw the ball down the field sort of guy, going to Baylor. That's a good pickup for them. But Tanner Bailey, Ben, he's the only quarterback in the state of Alabama over the last 2 years to get really any interest from Alabama or Auburn. Now, he ends up committing to Oregon, but with his family ties to both the Alabama program and the Auburn program, they showed interest in him, but he ultimately decides to go out west to Oregon. But all these other guys this year, as well as the 3 Power 5 guys we had from last year in state, really did not get much interest at all from our 2 SEC schools in state.
Yeah, it's really interesting with Tanner. We had him on a couple of weeks ago. He's basically a legacy to both Auburn and Alabama. Grandfather went to Alabama. Father goes to Auburn. He goes to Oregon. I'm not sure how hot those programs were on him. It's just hard to tell these days. But you mentioned, last year's class, Randy, which was kind of headlined by Daphne's Trent Battle, Fairhope's Riley Leonard, Will Crowder from Gardendale. All those guys went out of state. Leonard went to Duke, Battle to TCU, Crowder to West Virginia, and now we have 3 commits this year going out of state so far. Of course, these guys, anything can change until December at least, but Should we read something into that, Randy? Did these guys just not fit the Auburn, Alabama profile, or what do you read into that? Anything?
Well, one thing I read into it is that then 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this and say, man, there were a lot of misses. And the reason for that is going to be because of COVID-19. Because, you can watch these high school films and their highlights, and that tells part of the story. But not having these guys on campus and in camps and going through all that. I mean, look, last year we weren't even sure we were going to play a season. But we're going to end up with a lot of misses because college coaches are going to say, look, if we'd have normally had that guy in our camp like all these other years, we would have known better how to rank all these guys. I think there are going to be a lot of missed rankings from last year's class and then this coming up class where coaches are going to be like, look, we were a little bit in the dark about these guys. We'll see how it plays out. As I said, I'm a big fan of Trent Battle, the former Daphne quarterback who's going to TCU. We'll see how it plays out. But again, didn't get much of an interest at all from either Alabama or Auburn. I don't think it's because his style of play doesn't fit what they're doing. I just think that he emerged so much and became so much better as a passer. But by that point, kind of the wheels were in motion for who was going to go to Alabama and who was going to go to Auburn. And those guys turned out to be, for each school, a guy from Texas.
Of these 6 guys we just talked about that are committed or signed, is Battle the one that you would think, man, they may have missed on him the most?
I think so, but with COVID, I probably missed like all the other coaches, so I'll throw in that caveat. But I think Trent Battle is just like we were watching with Khalib Johnson. He is a guy who is a pass first kind of guy, but he has such good athletic ability that when he needs to run the ball, he can do that, and that's just what the future of the position is at this point. Also, a great student and good in the community, all that sort of stuff you want from your quarterback. So if I had to take one from these last 2 years right now, that's where I would go. But Ben, there's no question the list we just showed, there are going to be guys added to that list before we get to the end of the year. It's because they haven't had a chance to show their stuff all summer and the way they normally would to these college coaches.
Yeah, of course, you saw on that list another Nix, Caleb Nix, the younger son of Bo Nix and the son of Patrick Nix. It'd be interesting to see what type of year he has at Central Phoenix City this year. Randy, transitioning to the couple of weeks ago, they released the ESPN 300 list. I think Patrick's got that for us. There were 11 or 12 guys from Alabama. You see them there. Obviously, the number one prospect and has been for the last 2 years is Jeremiah Alexander from Thompson, 2-time state champion Thompson. Was committed to Alabama, decommitted late in the football season, has yet to recommit. I think I just invented that word, recommit. But still has Alabama in his top 5 along with Georgia and some other schools. What about him, and where can we expect him to end up, you think?
Well, I think he ends up at Alabama, though. I think Georgia has made a pretty strong push for him. But, Ben, you'll remember you and I both were at the state championship game at Jordan-Hare Stadium 2 years ago when he was a sophomore playing for Thompson. He was the best player on the field against that really good Phoenix City team. Thompson had a lot of great players. Central Phoenix City had a lot of great players. He was the standout player on the whole field. And remember, Ben, he was going against Javion Cohen, who has now got a great chance to be a starter at Alabama this year, the offensive lineman for Central Phoenix City. And clearly, Jeremiah Alexander was the better player on the field that day. So he's the first guy you really got to pay a lot of attention to. The other thing I would say about these 5 guys you've got on the list here, Ben, it's amazing that these guys, there are no late bloomers here. These guys have been the top recruits in the state in this class for about 4 years now. I mean, we've heard of Curtis Perry since he was about 8th grade. Same thing for Jeremiah Alexander, Emmanuel Henderson, kind of the same way. So these guys have been big-time recruits and been on the radar for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Henderson is the highest-rated guy committed right now to Alabama, the running back from Geneva County. Who on this list, Randy? You got some guys over there to the right as well. Obviously, the guys that are committed on this list, Emmanuel Henderson, as you see there, Tanner Bailey, we mentioned already. Robert Woodyard, the linebacker from Williamson, has been a long time, I think over a year now, committed to Alabama. But is anybody pop out at you on this list that maybe has a chance to really blossom and move up the charts as a senior?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued with Shamar James from Faith Academy. I've heard people compare him to Mark Barron, the Alabama safety who turned out to be a linebacker in the NFL. The game has changed since Mark Barron was coming out of St. Paul's, but I think Shamar James is a guy that with his size will play linebacker. He's visiting Alabama coming up. I think Alabama's probably the favorite. That's a guy that really intrigues me, Ben. You've seen him play quarterback, tight end, running back, slot back, defensive end, linebacker. He's played everything just about for Faith Academy. I think he's going to be a ball hawking linebacker when he gets to college. That's a guy that really intrigues me. I think he could move up this list, not only in Alabama, but up the ESPN 300 and all the other national rankings.
Yeah, I've even heard him projected as maybe a safety. I mean, I think
Yeah.
he could play a number of positions in college. Got injured in the basketball season, missed the last part of the basketball season, but hopefully he'll be back full steam at least by the summer. And right now, teams are going through spring practice, which we didn't have last year. So that's just another addition, COVID addition that we'll see this year. And of course, recruiting is going to open up in June, right? Visits will be able to take place, and that probably is going to change the landscape this year. Don't you think?
Yeah, and I think you'll see these rankings get shuffled then too when you actually get a chance to these coaches get a chance to see these guys in person. One other note, Ben, on Emmanuel Henderson from Geneva County, number 16 on this list we're showing here. He is the number 1 rated running back in the country according to the ESPN 300. Did you know if that stands, he'll be the first ever Alabama native to be the number 1 ranked running back in the country. And that includes Jackson. That includes, Bobby Humphrey, who was a great one, Gene Jelks, Lenny Patrick. You just go on and on down the list of great running backs there have been in this state that have gone all over the country to play. But none of them was ever the number 1 ranked running back in the entire country. Emmanuel Henderson is that, despite being from, sort of an outpost down near the Dothan area at Geneva County.
Yeah, there Patrick's showing some highlights of Emmanuel there. You'll see. And it is interesting because he plays in that Wiregrass area and just hadn't got a lot of attention. They haven't gone deep in the playoffs. But, he's just emerged. He's been in that number 2 spot behind Alexander for a long time. And I don't think a lot of people have seen him other than highlights.
Yeah, and people who are not familiar with him, the comp I have for him, Ben, he looks like a lot of people have said Darren McFadden, the great Arkansas running back, one of the all-time greats in the SEC. I think TJ Yeldon is very much a comp for him. He's a taller back. He's well over 6 feet tall, just like TJ Yeldon. Kind of runs a little bit upright. You can see his running style here. So I think that's a comp if you're looking for, okay, what's this guy like? Very much like TJ Yeldon, who, let's face it, Ben, we saw him play in high school. He could have been the number 1 rated back in the country as well and turned out to be a great one at Alabama and into the pro ranks.
Yeah, you're right, Randy. That's a good call there. If you look at, you may be interested in who has the most commits on this ESPN 300 list. It's Ohio State and Georgia. 8 each commits they already have on this list. They continue to recruit well. Alabama, they're right there as well. They got 5 recruits on the list. Jaheim Otis is the last guy they got, the most recent commit, along with Emmanuel Henderson, Ty Simpson, Robert Woodyard from Williamson, and Walter Bobb. So they're off to a good start. Auburn with one commit so far. Holden Grineer, the quarterback from Savannah, Georgia. What do you think about anything to read into those stats, Randy?
Well, I wouldn't put too much into it. I mean, you just look at the history of these recruiting rankings and when guys commit. I don't think it's that big a deal. One thing I would point out is it's a really good year in the state of Alabama. It's a deep year. When you look at all the way down to Laquan Robinson at 282, it's a really good year in the state of Alabama. So that bodes well for the Auburn class. That bodes well for the Alabama class. I think you're going to see Alabama sign more in-state guys this year than they have in recent years. And then the state of Tennessee is the best it has been in at least a decade, maybe 2 decades in terms of top-level recruits. And those guys are not going to the University of Tennessee. One of the top guys in the country on ESPN and every other recruiting site is Walter Nolan, a defensive tackle. Alabama very much in on him. He's in the running to be the number 1 or 2 ranked recruit in the entire country. So I think you're going to see some of those guys from Tennessee come to the state of Alabama, either Alabama or Auburn. So I wouldn't read anything into the number of recruits at this point, but just know that this area is particularly fertile this year for recruits, and I think it's going to be a really good year.
There's also some guys right on the edge of this list, Randy, including Lucas Taylor from St. Paul's, big offensive lineman who's committed to LSU. So there's some chances for some other guys to move up in this list, I think.
Yeah, I could have put Lucas Taylor. If I were doing this list, he would absolutely be in the top 300. And he's one of those guys that he plays till the echo of the whistle, and he is not making friends out on the field. And in a lot of ways, he just reminds me of one of those old school, tough offensive lineman that he could play tackle, but he's probably an interior lineman at the college level. Been committed to LSU for a while. Looks like he's pretty solid with the Tigers. So, yeah, I would move him up this list for sure if this were my list.
What do you one other question, Randy, before we let you go? What do you see? I mean, last year we had a lot of commitments. It seemed like in the spring and summer nobody was going anywhere. You had a flood of commitments. Now recruiting is going to open back up. Do you think it'll be a slower process for some of these guys that haven't committed, or where do you see that
I think
happening?
it will. I think last year, Ben, there was a little bit of panic set in for guys. Like, look, if I've got a good offer, I need to take it. I don't even know if I'm ever going to play another high school game. So if some school that I'm high on likes me and wants to offer me a scholarship, I'm just going to commit, and then we'll figure it out from there. This year, it seems like with the recruiting calendar opening back up, it may get a little bit back closer to normal this summer with guys being able to go to campus. So maybe it'll migrate back to where it was before last year. But a lot of guys, I think, just kind of said, look, if I've got an offer, I need some normalcy in my life. Let's go ahead and commit, make sure I know my future, and then we'll play it from there. So I think it will slow down a little bit this year compared to last year.
Yeah, it's going to be starting to get busy though when recruiting opens up, and we'll have a lot more for you. We'll have gifts as usual on this show. Randy, thanks for being with us today. Tell us about your radio show. When can people hear your radio show?
Yeah, I'm on live every day on Sports Talk 99.5. Also on the free iHeart app. Just go to the iHeart app and tap in my name, Randy Kennedy, and you can get the show anywhere in the world, including our weekly show with Ben Thomas.
Thank you. We'll be doing that at 2:00 today if you want to check it out. But also,
there you go.
Simone will be back next week. Hopefully, we'll delve more into recruiting, and we'll go from there. Thank you for joining us. Always happy to do this each week. Patrick, thank you for your help behind the scenes, and we'll see you next week.